Welcome to episode, I guess this is 58 of Killer POV, or technically our Texas Frightmare live. First time ever trying to do a live podcast, and it's terrifying already.
No headphones.
Yeah,
No
I
headphones.
feel weird without the headphones
Headphones
on,
make
guys.
us feel like we're on like the radio,
Yeah.
and hence bigger than life. And now I feel very small next to Elric Kane.
This is actually our first time out of studio, guys.
That's true.
Yeah.
True.
I don't hang out with these people otherwise. I mean,
Yeah.
no, that's not true. Anyways, I am Rob G from FearNet and Icons of Fright. This is Elric Kane from Inside Horror.
Hi, guys. Hi.
He likes a movie called Possession, just
I
in
do.
case you didn't know. Rebekah McKendry from Fangoria, from Killer POV.
But not today.
Not
Today,
today.
I'm not
Today.
Fango
You're barred from
affiliated.
talking about Fango. And our guest is the editor-in-chief of Fangoria magazine, somebody I've been looking forward to meeting for a long time.
I
Mr.
feel like
Chris.
I've met you, though. It's really weird.
I feel like we've known
No,
each
I
other,
really
right?
feel like I met all of you. Well, I have met you.
Yeah,
but
I know you a little
yeah,
bit.
it's- the technology is a weird thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Chris Alexander,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
And no, I've never been to
Yeah.
Canada,
No?
so I've never met you there. And have you come out?
No one ever comes to Canada. That's the thing. It's a very lonely
Well,
life.
they make
I lead.
movies there.
Yeah, and
That's
George
true.
Romero lives in Canada.
Dude, see,
They
you got
do.
George
Things-
Romero. You
Things
don't need
happen
us.
in Canada. Yeah.
Picture you in
know
a
what,
cabin,
Canada
like, up
because
there.
like a few things happen in Canada. Every little thing that does happen, we hold on to it with this death grip.
Right.
Because we don't have a lot. Like we gave you Jim Carrey, and we'll carry that to our grave. You know what
That's
I
what
mean?
Matt Curry Holmes. He's
Like,
always
that's
like,
it.
"We gave you Dan Aykroyd. You're welcome."
Yeah, Dan Aykroyd, Martin Short. We sent
John
good
Candy?
comedians. Yeah, we gave you John Candy.
John Candy.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
Anyone from Second City, we sent your way. Canadians are funny because the most miserable people in the world are the funniest, right?
You also gave
Right.
us Bieber. I don't know
We
how
give
I
you
feel
Bieber,
about that.
but yeah, you should like that because Bieber gives you something to talk about. I mean,
But
there's
didn't you
some
sh-
we
did-
give you a
weren't-
Crackmare and we give you all that fun stuff.
Weren't a bunch of awesome like early '80s horror movies shot in Canada?
True,
So
because
you
the
gave
tax
us all that.
shelter. Yeah, I know. Canadian. I don't know if you know what Cinepix is. Cinepix. John Dunning. We just lost a couple years ago. Who was? Anyone know what Cinepix is? No. Okay. Yeah. Well, here's a little bit of education. Okay. So in Quebec, in French Canada, throughout history, they were their censor board was the Catholic Church. So you could not show or say or do anything. And then as that started to break down in the '60s, this guy Dunning and his partner Andre Link started this little company called Cinepix, and they started exhibiting horror movies. And they were the first guys in the world to show Bruce Lee movies, in the Western world, that is. And so they were doing that. They showed Todd Browning's Freaks, and then they would put on these big events, and they kind of became hot shit. And then they started showing porn movies, softcore stuff. Then they started making their own softcore porn movies. They called maple syrup porn movies, right?
Wow.
Really good,
Maple
cool
syrup.
stuff. We should see. They're really hot and funny, and
Sounds sweet.
And they're they're 60s, so they got that vibe. And then they started making horror movies, and they discovered David Cronenberg, right?
Yeah.
Cronenberg came on the train. He said, I want to make a porn movie. They said, well, we've seen your shorts. You have a sexual sensibility, but we're not sure what kind of sexual sensibility. So they funded Shivers, Rabid, and all these amazing My Bloody Valentine,
Yeah.
Happy Birthday to Me, all these amazing horror movies.
Things.
Which one?
Things.
Things. Yeah, that wasn't
They didn't
them.
fund it,
That
that
wasn't
wasn't
them. They're just some other asshole Canadian. Yeah. So yeah, we for sure, man. Canadians have a dark side. Absolutely.
Wow.
And it's still going. I mean, Pontypool was Canadian, and
Yeah.
Cube was
Bruce McDonald,
Canadian.
yeah, Bruce
Yeah,
McDonald.
was,
yeah.
yeah.
Vincenzo Natali. Yeah.
Yeah, some of my
Yeah,
favorite
we got
films.
lots of Canadians.
And the
Yeah, let's do some
Shoshka
good stuff.
twins.
Yeah.
Shoshka.
The Shushka.
For anyone who was wondering how to pronounce their names, it's Shoshka.
That's right.
They just
so you
informed
know.
us.
Got it. We were corrected.
Yeah, we're
So how
just
do you
Hungarian.
pronounce it?
Shoshka.
No, you do not. Shaw? Is it
Shushka.
There, it's a Hungarian
Something
name.
like a Sean Connery thing or something?
Yeah, Shoshka twins.
Wow.
Something like that.
Okay.
So if you listen to the show, what we normally do is kind of pick a topic that caters to our guest. That way we could all kind of just riff and have a casual conversation. And we're going to tackle that in a minute. We actually thought it'd be interesting to talk about, Elric, how did you put it? Modern horror? Like post?
Yeah, contemporary. I
Contemporary.
mean,
Contemporary?
what year did you take over Fango?
That was 2009. I was told that it was happening, and I was sort of doing it, but it really wasn't announced. I guess it was 2009. Let's say 2009.
So we'll do post 2000 and
Sure.
particular interest in what happened in the few years since you've been running the magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how horror has evolved and changed since you took over Fangoria. That might be it.
Is that your question?
No, that's going to be our
That's our
topic.
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 We need to
Answer
break
in
the
10
ground
words or
down
less.
for you.
Whoa.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, also, I mean, like I've gotten questions at a lot of conventions about like where's the industry heading, and everybody. And that's not even at conventions. That's like the big mystery of Hollywood right now. Where is the industry heading? Because usually you can
To the
kind of
toilet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
You can usually kind of point and say like we're all making torture films, or we're all making J-horror ripoffs and things like that. But no one's really sure right yet. So yeah.
But is anyone ever really sure where it's going? 'Cause
No.
then, something comes
That's
out
all
of left
cyclical.
field and
Listen, you never know. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you can't anticipate these things. I mean,
Right.
who would have thought that this little thing called Paranormal Activity would suddenly redefine what people expect and want
Yeah.
from their
And a
horror
studio
movies.
can't manufacture that.
That's right.
That's
But
what
that's
they're
always like
trying to
those
do.
pivotal movies that come and change everything are always leaking out of the underground. They're always weird and fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're anti-commercial. And then Hollywood's so dumb. Instead of keeping to keep exploring these bizarre strains of art and film, they keep trying to just chase that commercial dragon again and again and again and again until they burn it out, and then some other guy comes along. You know, they're just not very creative in middle management, unfortunately. So.
Well, like an example, like right now, like The Conjuring is huge. So like every press release is a haunted movie that starts with the
The
and then a word,
invoking.
the bang,
ing.
the bang.
Yeah.
Well, and
Some-
it's a letter
something.
that is A, B, or C.
Yes.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
if some of you might not realize, the VOD has also radically changed Hollywood because it's forcing movies to basically title their movies within the first 3 letters of the alphabet because
they'll
they
do
don't
it.
believe you'll check all the way down when you're scanning what to watch.
It's also
And-
Netflix. I know
Yeah,
that's
no,
why
it's very
Level
strange.
33 called it Zombies,
Yeah.
was that they wanted
Yeah.
to make sure that when you went to the horror section of Netflix, it was at the top of the list.
That is
Yeah.
true.
And it's pretty strange. It's weird. But I mean, we're getting such quick results now. You used to make a movie, and then there's this long period before it's getting seen by an audience. Now everything's pretty quick, and the information about it is particularly quick.
Right.
Especially because you guys, obviously Fangoria started when that information wasn't just out there. You had to buy the magazine.
Yes.
Now you guys are a print medium in a digital world, and so that's obviously a major challenge in itself, I assume.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
Yes, on every conceivable level, it's a challenge. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know what to say about that as far as trends and what's happening. Because people always say, what's going on, what's the future, what's happening. It's like, well, you know what, the future's all around us, and there's different horror movies coming from every corner of the globe all the time. In fact, to me, this is the most exciting time to be a horror fan, because you're not. Back in the days of early Fango, that was it. You'd wait. Fango comes, suddenly they're the guys that have all the news. Now you get it from everywhere all the time. You're plugged in. It's a global village. And everywhere, someplace, sometimes somebody's making something interesting. And as long as you're wide awake and looking, you will find something cool. If you're a lazy prick and are just going through, you stop at B on your Netflix queue, then it's, you're going to be grumpy. But I see amazing stuff everywhere all the time. And I think the most important thing for me, and this is just as a film fan, period, and loving, just the byproduct of loving horror, is that as I age too, and as I get battered down by trends, I'm always looking for my horror hiding in places. Like we talked about this, Elric, and Under the Skin, which is on the cover of Fango 332.
A ballsy move.
Well, yeah, it was because
Stop
some
by the
people are
Fango
like, hey,
booth
why
to
you put
purchase?
Scarlett Johansson on the cover of Fango? It's like, well, I'm not. I'm putting Under the Skin on the cover of Fango. It just so happens that Scarlett's in it. She's really good in it. But, that's not a horror movie. You talk to the director about that. He's like, I don't know. How do you think it's a horror movie? You tell him. He's like, okay, then I guess it's a horror movie. It's kind of interesting. But I found that movie filled with far more dread and terror than anything that's called a quote-unquote horror movie out there now. And I say Lars von Trier's Melancholia filled me with more dread than any horror movie I've seen in a long time. So I'm always trying to find horror hiding in other genres. That to me is very interesting, and it also maintains that quest, which as a film fan, as a kid, looking, searching, finding, people say, this is a bad movie. It is? Well, I'll find something good in there. I think most horror fans have that kind of sense of quest.
Yeah.
And you need
Well, it
that.
also brings up balance because your position with Fangoria, you have to balance your interests, your personal
Yes.
interest with,
Or
obviously.
and defend.
Right,
It's-
exactly.
You're,
So-
it's always on. You're always on trial.
Right. So Under
Yeah.
the Skin, obviously, by placing that on the cover, which I also thought what you wrote about it in your first rights was
Right.
really, great. It really justified it. Now some people might not even bother to read that.
Yeah.
So they might just get, hey, why hasn't this got, But you've also have Gore Zone now, so you can point them to, hey, we do the Gloria
Yeah.
cover over at Gore Zone.
Yeah, you try to, someone said to me when I got the gig, it's like, well, just know you can't please them all. I said, well, maybe you can. You just got to really kind of work harder, and you got to just have the courage of your convictions. I mean, I put Nicolas Cage on the goddamn cover in a 2-part article.
We had
And
him
I
on the
called him
cover.
the master of horror.
He's been on there a couple times.
On the cover? Yeah,
Yeah.
but not as Nicolas Cage.
Not as
like, here's
censor.
Season of the Witch or
Yeah.
something. It's like, oh, okay. But you put Nicolas Cage on the fucking front, and it's a sit-down on his island. See, and that was the angle, right? Fango's going to the Bahamas to go to Cage's private island while roosters are walking around, and he's asking if you want to sacrifice them in a voodoo ritual, and he's hacking a snail apart and pulling a cock out, saying, I want you to eat this just like Viagra. That's amazing. And then as soon as I got there, you get off the boat and spread out all over the table are Hammer horror movies. So the first hour of our meeting was just geeking out over Hammer movies. I mean, this guy eats, sleeps, and breathes horror. And if you look at any of his roles, I mean, he's always like this arcane element inside I don't care if it's a romantic comedy. Nick Cage does not belong in that romantic comedy. He's just weird. He's scary. He's like beamed in from another dimension. So I put that on there, but then I spent the next year trying to defend why I did. You know, and I can, but you're always kind of, if you take those chances and risks, you gotta be sure that you can back them up with the fans. Yeah.
Is it hard to stay interested when you are catering more just to the fans, or if you're doing something that you feel is less interesting to you personally, but you know people demand it or desire it?
Well, what do you mean? Is it you saying?
Is it hard to stay interested? I guess. I mean, I think sometimes we get oversaturated with having to watch horror films rather than the desire.
Yeah.
And especially in a position like what you're doing, you're constantly thinking about it. You know, do you ever have to step outside of that bubble and do something else for yourself?
Kind of phone it in a little bit. You mean?
Well, no, I'm not going to ask that question.
No, well, I mean, being engaged is paramount. I think.
Right.
I think the minute I'm not engaged anymore, I don't want the job anymore.
Right.
You know, it's like we were talking about this yesterday. This Craig Ferguson skit, where I found on the internet from 2007, where he's like, I don't do this for the money, right? And he goes, which is convenient because there's not much, right? So we don't make a lot of money doing this gig on any level, but you do it because you love it. So the minute it becomes dull, is the minute you just want to just go get a job at Starbucks.
Good.
It's funny when you mentioned the thing with Nicolas Cage. Like, I would never have pegged him as a Hammer horror fan.
Huge.
But that's kind of cool. Is like when you meet a lot of these people that you interview from the movies. Is if you get that moment where you realize, oh, we're both totally horror nerds.
Yeah.
So was there anybody surprising that you met along your journey at Fangoria that you're like, oh wow, this person's way more into horror than I could ever imagine?
It happens all the time because not only do I have a lot of gigs, right? So Fango, but also I don't kind of totally get lost up horror's asshole. I also write I'm the film critic for Metro, which is the daily. I think there's one Metro daily all over the world, but Toronto and Canada I write for. So I can see other movies that I don't normally see, and I can review them and just be part of that and get paid. So I do that, and then I end up talking to these guys, and then I brings up what my other gig is, and then if they find out, oh my god, like Jason Segel, okay, like the Muppets.
Yeah.
I brought my son and I, who at the time was 5. We had a little column in Metro where we reviewed kids movies together. So I brought him to interview Jason Segel for the Muppets, and he found out the Fango gig, and that was the interview. That was it. It was just he wanted to talk about horror movies nonstop. It's like this guy should not be. He's the cute little guy next door who's in the Muppet movie, and yet he's like the big horror nerd who's just dying to star in a horror movie, right?
Wow.
Yeah, so it's cool stuff like that. And when you find, again, it's, as you guys know, it's like a secret handshake, right?
Yeah.
You love this shit, you're in it, you came in it at a certain point in your life, and no matter how your life changes, that never will. So it's cool.
It's really neat seeing some of the people that we get at the Fango booth that you would never expect. Like Method Man came at Kamikaze, and he was just there, like walking around, getting mobbed by people. But he came up to the Fango booth and was like, "Fucking love you guys," and sat there and talked horror with us for a while. Sebastian Bach did the same thing. Or even here yesterday, the band Ghost was walking around, and Papa came over to the table and was like, "Can I get a picture with you?" And I was like, "What? You want a picture with me?" And he was like, "No, get the Fangorias. Let's take a picture." It was amazing.
Well, it's like, even like the Native Indians like hiding in the mountains somewhere in some remote village. They, don't know anything. They don't even know what a car is. But you say Fangoria. Oh, Fangoria. Yeah. Like everybody knows whether you read it or not, you're aware of it.
Do you remember your first exposure? I mean, this is open to all of you. I think the first exposure to, whether it's Fangoria magazine or whatever the magazine was that you first came across, because I grew up in New Zealand at that time, and Fangoria was the only magazine that made it that far. As far as my memory, I don't remember seeing. So you guys had Famous Monsters and other things here. I didn't.
I completely missed Famous Monsters. I know a lot of people, that was their introduction. Fango was the first for me. But
Yeah.
Yeah, what was it for
me
you?
too, but I'm in Canada too, so we had to work harder. And in Ontario, it was Fango and Gorzo were up in the porn racks a lot of times. So you'd reach up and it'd be like double D's, and it's like, wow. It's like it's like this extra
How to choose.
danger. Shouldn't be looking at any of this. But I remember seeing. I think it was the first Fango I saw. I pulled it down and opened it up, and it was like My Bloody Valentine. And when she came out of the dryer, it was the gatefold. It was the Scream Grades poster, and I was like, oh my god. And then later on, the Dead Zone with the Nicholas Campbell with the scissors in his face and everything else. But at that point, it was cool. My dad loved horror. I knew all about horror. I loved it. I knew who everybody was. But what Fango did in finding it and when I could, it legitimized that. It made me realize I wasn't just like that guy on the school bus who liked all this weird shit. Like other people did too. And also, it taught me some of as it did for all of us, the wizard behind the curtain, the illusion. how they did this shit, which was amazing. It was such a revelation that this stuff, and you could do it. You could order this stuff from the back of the magazine and get all this crap and run around and scare your mom and open your wrists and go, hey, right? It was amazing. And yeah, that's all we had. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have any of that. Back in our day, we didn't have that stuff. That was it for me. You know?
Yeah, that's funny. Actually, I just found a photo that I posted that I totally forgot about trying to freak my parents out, where I just put tons of blood in my hand and put a scissor in the middle of it.
Oh, yeah?
Just be like,
And did it freak them out, though? Or they just expected
no, they just knew I was
what
weird.
Rob to do was weird?
No.
Yeah.
I used to, in the Walden books in my own hometown, they would keep Fango kind of off to the side, but it was with the porn mags, and they kept it in the clear mailer, like porn mags, where you can't like go in and leaf through it or anything. But there was always one, like somebody would always rip it open. There was always one that'd been leafed through there, and I remember leafing through them.
Pages stuck together.
Yeah.
That's weird.
And I used to go in, and my parents would get it for me, but it had to be like a special occasion. Like I couldn't have a subscription until I was in high school, and then they let me have a subscription. And the first one that came was the virus issue, the Jamie Lee Curtis one, and yeah, I loved it since then. But Mad Monster Party was a big thing for me too when I was a kid. Or Cracked. It was Cracked Monster Party.
Mad Monster Party.
Yeah, I loved those. Any of the like little jokey kids monster mags.
I don't remember that was an offshoot of Mad. Was that what it was?
Cracked had a
Cracked.
version,
Cracked,
and
okay.
yeah, I think Mad may have had a version too, but I don't think that theirs was monthly.
But Mad was always a little more sophisticated. Crack was kind of for morons, right? And that's
Yeah.
why I liked Cracked. I mean,
Yeah.
Cracked was way more accessible.
And
yeah.
I was definitely reading it when I was really young, and a lot of it was just like, little sketches with like Wolfman and, Frankenstein doing cool stuff. But then they would have these pictures, these like really gory pictures with captions. So I remember this one vividly because I cut it out and put it on my wall, but it was a man's face split in half, and it was breaking open, and you could see his brain, and it said, "I've got a splitting headache." And I loved that picture. I used to stare at it all the time. So.
Yeah. Well, I loved, talking about like putting Cage or Gene Simmons or any of these guys that are kind of left field in the mag. It's like, to me, the Fango I really grew up with was that first decade with like Bob Martin and everything, when they didn't really know what it was, so it was an experimental mag. And they were just throwing everything at the wall, seeing what stuck, and wrestling and whatever else. And, everyone always talks about issue number 9, and that is the one I love the most because it's just the weirdest. It's got, Motel Hell on the front. It's got the Howling. It's got a huge article on Jack Kirby about Thundar the Barbarian. It's got Conan in there. It's got an interview with Andre de Toth about House of Wax, but it was an interview conducted over like 2 years because there was no internet and the guy lived overseas, so they were just pen pal it. And it was that interview that they did for 2 years. Yeah. So it's like, this is wild. This is like, go for it. Whatever sticks, we'll just keep riding it. And fans just ate it up because you never knew what the next page was, when you flipped it, what was going to be there. And to
Have
me,
you tried bringing some of that into your last few
yeah,
years? Like
oh
always
yeah.
just mixing it up?
Always try to like, I don't like set visits. Set visits to me, I remember like, when I was freelancing for Fango for years before I got the editor gig, I'd be like reading it and going, actually not reading it. I'd be looking to see I'm in there, on the shelf it went. I remember the first time I said this magazine definitely needs a wash is when I looked, there was like a 7-page or 8-page set visit for The Box. The fucking Box with Cameron Diaz, which is like, first of all, a bastardization of
Great
Richard
Twilight Zone
Matheson.
episode too, yeah.
But really, how walking around a film set, looking at guys, you've been on film sets, that's boring.
And they feed you the information when you're on a film set. They literally give you a fact sheet of what you're allowed to
Well, also you
report
have to
on.
And then
replace
everyone's
it,
in there, it's a junket too, so everyone's the same lines, like, this director knows what he wants. This actor is amazing to work
All
with.
these actors are bringing their A game.
Yes.
Wow, yeah. And it's only 8 pages because the guy who wrote it wants the longer, bigger paycheck and everything. So anyways, it was just like kind of, this magazine needs a little bit of a shake-up.
But also a lot of that information now is going directly online.
Yes.
And so you guys have
Instantly
to
irrelevant.
create content that is something that it's not so time specific and something that's worth drawing you in, right?
That's exactly right, is that, as soon as this, and studios haven't picked up on that yet. So they're still playing that kind of weird tango with you, like you need them, and that you really don't, because it's all completely irrelevant by the time we hit stand. So we have to find interesting angles at all times to keep the reader engaged and informed.
Have you ever had someone who had, because you're sometimes going with, say, Nick Cage, who might not seem like an obvious choice, anyone resistant to being a part of Fango because they think maybe horror is a negative thing?
You know what? I can't.
Never
I'm
happened.
sure there is somewhere, someplace down the line, but no, most people.
Because it's changing, right? Walking Dead, we were just talking about this.
It's totally.
The fan base changes when mainstream
it's not
things
ghettoized
get
anymore.
popular. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so on the level. It's so much, so part of the commercial zeitgeist. I mean, horror is big business all over the world. Video game, I mean, it's everywhere. It's omnipresent. It's not a dirty secret anymore. You know, they say the difference between horror and porn back in the day is just what spurted where and when. But not anymore. You know, now it's even porn is legitimate. You know, even like
Porn's making more than most
Fuck,
movies.
I saw Lars von Trier's Nymphomaniac in a theater. I just watched the whole 5 hours of it, and it just like so much cum. Oh my God, you know. It's like, and this is like a mainstream movie, right? So you know.
But I mean, speaking of horror porn, you brought back Gore Zone.
Yeah.
And that seems to be an attempt to be able to still go there with a magazine. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, even got banned in your home country for a while.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I mean, it's not even like you read Gore Zone. It's really not that much different than Fango. It's
Right.
more the sensibility that anything goes. In Gore
It feels
Zone.
dirtier, which is
It
fun.
feels way dirtier because
Yeah.
there is nudity and there is sex, but there's also a lot of independent stuff. So it's grottier and the blood is grottier. It's not computer. It's not CGI. It's not clean, pretty. It's just ugly, and but it's fun. It's
Why
a
did it
lot
go?
of
I don't
fun.
know the history. Why did it go away and why did it come back?
Well, I don't know. It's like we were talking about this. It's like, you know, if you look at the last issue of Gore Zone before it had its death rattle, it was issue 27, and it was like Gore Zone presents Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It was Robert De Niro on the front.
It lost
Right?
its
Wow.
edge.
Yeah, it's like it didn't know what it
Yeah.
was doing, and then it wasn't. It couldn't really be too gory because it was always in the newsstands. But at that point, Chaz Ballin had packed his bags. He wasn't part of it, and so that rock and roll edge was gone, and. You know, and then they were competing against themselves with Fango. It didn't make any sense. You know, Fango was already had its enough blood, and
And I remember talking to Tony Timpone about this, and
Yeah.
there were so many other horror magazines popping up that they did Fangoria, Gore Zone, and they launched Toxic Shock.
Toxic
horror.
So
Shock.
they had three
Yeah.
completely different horror magazines, and they were essentially competing with themselves.
And they were all the same, and they were all
Yeah,
designed
they were all
by
pretty much the
Bill,
same.
and they all looked the same.
Yeah, and competing even against the Gore Zone thing. We also had a special effects thing. It was called like Cine Secrets or something like that was coming out too. And we did that in like a 6-issue run, but it was all happening right that final year of Gore Zone.
Yeah, and plus it was the time too. Like, what was it, 94?
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
nine.
so
It
it
was
was like
mid
horror was kind
90s.
of like having a nap at that time. You know, the 90s were until Scream, I guess, were pretty fucking desperate for horror.
But then
Yeah.
it gets even worse after Scream because they all start imitating
Yeah, then
Scream
they're like-
for a while.
Yeah, then it's all the
It's all
teens.
teens
It's a big
and
joke
yeah.
now, right? That is a nudge, wink, wink horror. Ugh. Blech.
What was some of your gateway horror? I mean, just we talk about it on the show. Every episode is usually about our childhoods or
Yeah.
something that affected us. What are some of the key memories you have?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I always say it was, you know, the imagery, the aesthetics was looking at the cover of Love Gun, the Kiss record, in the library when I was 3 or 4. And I was looking at Gene Simmons. I didn't know what he was. And with the fangs. And I used to have nightmares about Kiss. And then when I finally listened to them, I'm like, oh, it's just shitty rock. Kiss is my favorite band now. But at that time, I really was expecting it to be chains rattling and people screaming. But I didn't know what it was. And I was obsessed. And then I went to, in Canada, has anyone been to the Canadian side of Niagara Falls? No?
Has anyone been to Canada?
Has anyone been to Canada?
Anyone? Anyone?
Oh, we got
Okay,
to
well,
We
get
got
if
a couple
prove
if
it.
you ever find yourself in Canada on in Niagara Falls, first of all, our view of the falls is quite lovely. But we have that little strip called Clifton Hill, which is like, you know, a little tiny microscopic Vegas, I guess. Remember, there's casinos. But there's this shitload of wax museums, and there's a place called the Castle or House of Frankenstein. And still to this day, it scares the hell out of me. But my granny took me there, and as soon as I walked in, it's get the sound effects in the dark and you know, that shit. And they wouldn't let us back out, so we had to walk through the duration of it. And we exited. I was screaming, crying, hiding. I was like, I was in living, breathing hell for like 20 minutes. And then we get out at the end, and we exit through the gift shop, and it's bright like this, and there's like music playing, and people buying like snow globes, and it was like so normal. And I was like, how could I just have come out of the bowels of hell and now be in this world? It was the weirdest thing. And so you become obsessed with why you're reacting to certain things. And so, yeah, but the movie, I think the first movie that really did me in hard. I mean, I'd seen The She-Beast, the Michael Reeves movie, when they're dipping Barbara, well, they actually weren't dipping Barbara, but it was supposed to be the witch, but only a few minutes of it. And maybe the odd Godzilla thing, but it was Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 78 version. And it was, I remember in the back, I had a Batman comic where he was fighting a guy named Blockbuster. And on the back, it had that poster, you know, the body with the casting the long shadows. And it's like roots going into the ground. And I don't even think I could read the words Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but I just looked at this, and it was clearly people running away, but also dissolving. And you can't really articulate how you're reacting to it. It has a visceral reaction to it, and you're just thinking about it. And then the following year, so I would have been 5, City TV, which was the local channel, had picked up the screening rights, whatever. They bought it, and so it was a big deal. They were screening Body Snatchers. And so I was like, I gotta see this fucking movie. I gotta see it. And my parents went out to go see a movie, and they told my babysitter, do not let him watch Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Do not. And that's only a PG movie, but if you've seen that movie, that's a hard PG. That movie's bloody and dark
it's
and
scary even as an adult. I saw it again this year. It's a terrifying.
It is that
film.
final image with there's no music. I'm getting chills just talking about it. It still does me. I still think that's a masterpiece.
Yeah, it's a great film.
But anyway, so my babysitter was clear that this wasn't going to happen, and the babysitter, God bless her, fell asleep. So I picked up the controls and 07, which was the channel, and it was right in the sequence where Sutherland's hacking his own pod in the face with the whatever it was, a spade or whatever. And I was and I fumbled. I turned it off, and that's all I saw of it, and that was it. I had nightmares forever because of that sequence, but all I could think about was seeing more of it. What happened? How did it even get to that point? And how could he even be hacking himself up? My brain was like the metaphysics of it were just staggering. So that was my big, absolute coming out party was Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
It's awesome that you can have something like horror is the only thing you can have your initial experience be somewhat traumatic, but then being drawn back right to it.
Yeah.
Like we talked about, mine was Creepshow at 5 years old.
Oh yeah,
and it was
Creepshow
the Crate
big
Monster,
too.
and it's like I had nightmares for years, and yet somehow through that you're working something out.
You're
working
always
through
bought a
something.
Creepshow
Yes.
poster this week.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
you
like
bought a
that's
Creepshow poster.
Highlight of this festival is that Mondo put out their half sheet for Creepshow, and it was the Crate Monster, which blew my mind.
Yeah.
So.
No, the Crate,
Very cool.
Fluffy. Yeah, that did me in.
But these same things you could go back, and that's almost comical now to watch that.
The other thing is too is that there's a nostalgia factor woven into this. So if you love this stuff when you're a kid, it's tied into certain experiences that are almost warm, right? No, they can be not, maybe not. But someone really wants to get a hold of you.
I know.
But it's a very
I'm
unconscious
sure it's a
nostalgia.
subscriber.
Probably, yeah.
It's not a nostalgia I think we're trying to experience again. It's almost, I think it unconsciously works away.
Creepshow, my dad used to work a lot of nights, so I would watch a lot of movies with my mom. So, and she would let me watch everything. When Miami Vice came on, she wouldn't let me watch The Dukes of Hazzard because she thought it was moronic. So I had the toys. I had no idea what Boss Hogg did. I was like, who is this guy and how does he factor into this world? He would drive the General Lee. I didn't know what he did. But Miami Vice was, stay up till 10 o'clock on Friday night. You're going to watch Miami Vice with me. And that's, still
Guys
pretty
doing coke
dark
with machine
shit.
guns. It's fine. It's just an Uzi.
I remember going to school
Formal.
saying, this is what you want, this is what you get. That PIL song was in that before it was in Hardware, right? And I was like, that was amazing episodes, like a Giallo, right? So I was always allowed to watch this stuff, but I was watching it with my mom. So it was really cool, and we used to watch like Heavy Metal, the cartoon, like it was on cable all the time. And we watched Creepshow together. I watched Life Force with her, there's Matilda May's rump like endlessly, and it's like, but it was just like a nostalgic, warm, safe, cozy feeling. And also, I used to scan the TV guides and highlight all the horror movies, and I used to put a alarm clock under my pillow, and I'd have it wake up because I didn't have a VCR or anything, and then I'd sneak downstairs, and you're very careful, and you'd stop. Okay, and you'd get down there. You didn't want to wake mom or dad up, and then you'd flip on the TV and keep the volume so quiet, so quiet, so quiet, and then you'd hear a sound and you'd turn it off. And be sitting there in dead silence. So you're scared, right? You're watching a scary movie by yourself at night with the sound barely on. It's an alien experience, but you're also scared you're going to get caught. So it was just this weird feeling. So, I was watching weird shit like Death Curse of Tartu at like 4 a.m, which is brutal. But I was scared of it because of the environment, right? So, yeah, it's so tied into, all that stuff is so deeply, I think as a horror fan, it's so tied into your DNA and the very fabric of who you are.
I did that with it was Freddy's Nightmares and Tales from the Crypt when it first started on HBO.
What, the real, like the original Tales? Oh, the TV show Tales.
The
from
TV
the
show?
Yeah.
I because we had HBO and my parents thankfully would go to sleep early,
Yeah.
so I would sneak down because they'd show them pretty late.
Yeah, and they were really dirty, like a lot of set.
Yeah, they keep
We
them-
had the
yeah.
in Canada. We had the censored Tales from the Crypt. I didn't even know there was boobs and stuff in that
Oh
show.
yeah,
till
that
years
was pretty
later.
intense.
Huh?
It was all cut. Yeah, really lousy.
We were talking before about how you can't predict trends in horror. But I'm just curious, since you took over the magazine, what's been the biggest surprise in terms of a movie that became super successful?
Well, I said Paranormal Activity.
Yeah.
And that was a huge one.
I'm shocked by that, by the way.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
just the fact.
No offense to anybody that likes the movie, but because I saw it like a year before it came out
Oh yeah.
and
They-
hated it.
Yeah, I know. I still don't like it.
I don't like it either,
I
so-
don't
Well-
like found footage stuff. And there'd been a couple ones, I think prior to that were around. It was kind of a
Home movie was out.
Home movie had happened, but it was just like a little anchor.
And Poughkeepsie Tapes was circulating.
Nobody
Nobody saw it,
yeah.
but yeah.
It was.
But none that reached the success of that.
No, I
That's
would
just-
never have anticipated that would have dictated the any kind of commercial drive for anybody. That it's interesting but what's really bizarre about that is that a movie that you and I could make with this, really, and now Hollywood is trying to capture that genie in a bottle, and yet they're spending like millions or an exorbitant amount of money for something, and it's just like you're shaking your head and like, really?
Yeah, like the new Friday the 13th, for example,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, fixating on making it found
It must be
footage.
found
If they're
footage.
still
They're
doing
$13
it.
and
million
way too
found
late out of the gate
footage.
too. That's going to be a bomb the base, man. No, it's not going to work.
Well, there's something about the low budget aesthetic of found footage when it first came on the scene that I think was scary with Blair Witch, especially.
Right, of course. I didn't even think about Blair
Yeah.
Witch, but
it was
didn't
scary
take
because
off.
you didn't. There's this line where you can almost fool yourself into thinking it's not a movie. Whereas now it's been when you put a $2 million found footage on screen, it's you're watching a movie
Or
from
you
the
throw
first
an
second.
actor that has who it is. I mean,
Right.
as soon as you throw an actor with any kind of who's got it's baggage, right? It's like, well, that's the guy from this. Then it's clearly you're in an artificial environment. But I mean, that's what I want personally. That's what I want out of movies. To me, movies. And this is cliche, but they should be like a dream. They should be a fantasy. They should be an escape from whatever world we're in. And especially as I age too. I mean, I'm less inclined to watch movies where people get hurt just for the sake of getting hurt anymore, because I know that I'm so surrounded by that. And to me, it's just like someone stepping on a bunch of flowers for the sake of doing it. And I like my horror to be jet black, dark, bizarre, psychosexual, as dirty and bizarre as they come. But to me, if they got to go all the way. It's got to be really phantasmagorical and strange for me to connect with it anymore. Anything reality-based is not interesting to me anymore.
about
I'm
like
surrounded by reality TV and all this shit. It's like, and none of it's real anyways. So
Right.
you know.
What about? I mean, you're talking about, say, torture porn, Saw, Hostel. What do you think? Kind of where's the death rattle in there for that trend?
Is
Or-
it dead already? No,
I mean, they could be. The concepts could be reinvented.
Yeah.
Like Saw could go on forever as long as somebody has an interesting
I
idea.
like to see the Saw movies. I'm okay with, and because I think they're interesting as kind of like a package, right? And at least they make some attempt to they have a mythology there,
and there's some mystery and
there's mystery. They engage you on a different level, and there's just a certain kind of like you are literally playing some sort of game, and they are like a movement unto themselves. But like anything, like zombie movies, as you know, every weekend some guy's sending us a movie.
Every weekend we get like 10 a day.
Yeah, whatever. It's like a bunch of guys in their backyard with like ketchup on their face. Going, it's like, that guy made a zombie movie,
No
man. Will
plot.
Fango cover
no
it?
plot. But we get the
No.
same with the torture
The
films.
torture stuff, too.
Where
It's
it's like no
some guy
rationale.
some guy goes to a strip joint and says, hey, listen, here's a couple bucks. Come back, take your top off, and I'm going to tie you to a chair and duct tape your mouth, and then I'm going to get my buddy over here to like giggle and snort over you while he smacks you around and stuff. And now we got a movie.
And wear a pig mask.
Yeah,
pig mask.
pig mask.
Every
We'll
one
put
of them.
a fucking pig mask on, and it's like a nightmare. It's scary. So, but they're cheap to make, easy to make, and just because you can make them doesn't mean you should. And there's a lot more, like the Saw movies actually exhibit some craft
Yeah.
and some skill, you know.
we always see that horror needs more Don Coscarelli. Like it needs more those guys who are like fantastics, you know, people who went into this thing that was fantastic about
Yeah.
movies. And I
Yeah,
agree
or
with
that's
them.
why I love European horror so much. Like it's my favorite thing in the world. You know, we talk Suspiria being one of your favorites, Fulci being like one of my idols, and even the French like Jean Rollin, Jess Franco is probably my favorite.
Well, and you made
filmmaker.
your own film recently, and was that something you were
Couple
always
films, yeah.
looking to do, or was that something that more recently you became interested in?
Yeah,
making
no,
film?
I just always I went to film school, but I kept dropping out because it's like I didn't like people telling me what art was and stuff. And then I started doing music, so the movies were just an excuse to make images to accompany music I'd made, really. And I kind of compartmentalize that away from Fango a lot because they're kind of arty, and I like Lars von Trier and stuff, so they're kind of pretentious and
I know the feeling on this
Yeah.
show.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
get shit from these two
I
all the
love
time.
that to me, but that's the weird, and they're kind of weird. In the first watch, maybe you don't like them so much, and that's my favorite movies. Even I've seen so many movies that are my favorite movies that I've seen them once, and I'm like, well, I'm not sure about that. But I can't stop thinking about it. I go back again, or I catch it at 2 in the morning, and you see little bits or some piece of music that's stuck in your head, and those are the ones you keep going back to.
Cronenberg's films often
Yeah.
were like that.
Oh, yeah.
I saw Dead Ringers at
when I
maybe
was a
8
kid,
years old.
and it didn't hit you.
Repulsed. I
I-
didn't know what I was looking
But
at.
also
you know?
dull. Like,
Yeah.
you couldn't engage. Even The Exorcist, when I saw it as a kid, and it was the cut version, so your mother scrubbed socks in hell. She didn't suck cocks. But I didn't get why everyone was so like, this is scary. It's like, this is a bunch of people. The movie's really dark. like not dark and thematically. It was just darkly lit, so it's kind of muddy, and people just walking around having these overlapping conversations, and you know, it's just like what. And then I saw The Omen. I'm like, now that's my movie because there's crazy dogs running around like cemeteries and shit, and David Warner's head comes off with a piece of glass. But then I went back to The Exorcist only recently, only like a few years ago, and watched it again as an adult, and I totally understood what that movie is and why it works, and I agree. Now I've drank the Kool-Aid, Gooble Gobble, and one of you, because I really do believe that's probably one of the greatest horror films ever made, ever.
You know, that's one for me that has scared me so bad. I've only seen it maybe 2 or 3 times in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I'd like to revisit it now as an adult and really appreciate it. But do you have a film that you have been scared to go back to?
Yeah.
I'll give you my
Antichrist.
Yeah,
Seen it
fucking
once.
Antichrist. It's on my shelf, still in plastic.
I thought you loved that one.
No, I do.
I
but
know, it-
I can't watch it. I'm afraid to watch it again. I was so. Has anyone seen the movie Antichrist? It's Lars von Trier. Huh? Yeah, Willem Dafoe and Charlotte Gainsbourg trying to fuck the
A lot
pain
of
away.
penises.
Yeah, and then
And the
she
fox,
goes, cuts her
talking fox.
own clitoris off. But I mean, that's not it. It's like, especially as a parent, I have kids, and at the beginning, there's a devastating sequence where the child falls out the window and dies, and then she just goes crazy. So it's hyper violent, just a really alien, awful, and grisly experience, but yet so compelling and interesting. But man, it's not a movie on a Sunday afternoon. You're gonna go, I'm gonna pop up Antichrist.
There's so many
Break out some
movies that I
beers.
have in my collection
Yeah.
that I will never watch again because I don't need to.
Your Cannibal Holocaust is another one too.
yeah.
I mean, I don't just pop up Cannibal Holocaust. I like the music. I listen to the score.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Martyrs is like that for me.
Oh, yeah, that's another one.
Inside, we've talked about before. These are movies that I love, I respect. They will stay in my collection just
Yeah, they're
because I have such
masterpieces.
respect.
Yeah.
But I can never watch
They're
them
not
again.
fun, no. But that's power. I mean, you respect like the Fred Vogel movies, August Underground. You know, we put Fred on the cover of Gore Zone 30, and even the cover I had trouble looking at. I'm like, oh,
It's
wow.
gritty.
Whoa, wow.
Yeah.
But you know, I respect Fred. I think Fred is an amazing guy, and he's done something very important. There's a power that those August Underground movies have, but I don't like them. I don't enjoy them. You know. So yeah, I'm afraid to go back to Antichrist.
Sometimes, for me, sometimes it's I just don't want to shatter the memory of it. So for me, the movie is The Entity. I saw it once as a kid, scared the absolute shit out of me, and now I own it. But it's like I'm kind of scared because like maybe it's not as scary as I
Oh,
remember.
yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
There's that
It's-
fear.
It is.
Maybe,
It
you
still
know.
is intense. I mean,
Really?
yeah. It's so. I mean, it's so sexual.
Yeah.
I mean, they're blowing. I mean, she's naked and they're like blowing air guns on her. It really looks like
impressions.
hands are on her
Yeah.
flesh.
Yeah.
And this is Barbara Hershey. This isn't just some B-grade actor.
Yeah,
you know,
it's
and I
crazy.
think it's a terrifying film. The second half becomes more of like an investigation,
poltergeist
more
thing,
of a
yeah.
more of
Yeah.
a poltergeist thing.
Plus
yeah.
the mystery of like that Barbara Hershey never talks about the movie. It could be as simple as she just had a terrible time making it.
Yeah, it
But
was
when
just
you
a
have
really
like, this
bad
weird
shoot.
ghost story,
But
and,
also,
yeah.
it was kind of like I didn't hear a lot about The Entity for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was like, I know it came out. It was always on TV when I was a kid, but I never really heard a lot of horror fans talking about The Entity. It was only like in the last 5 years. I think people really kind of maybe rediscovered it
Yeah.
and talk a lot about how powerful that movie is, and it is. Yeah.
I once interviewed Barry Taff, the actual guy that investigated the real case on the
whatever her
Entity,
name is,
actually
yeah.
for Chris Gaetano's Montauk Chronicles thing.
Oh, okay, cool.
And I don't really believe in the supernatural, but weird shit happened when he was around.
Yeah.
Like stuff with the candles in the background.
Yeah.
It's just I feel like some of those dudes that are really into it, they just exude that kind of aura
Yeah.
where it's just like I'm glad to talk to you for an hour, but you have to leave now.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
There's just
Whatever
some
you
sort of
brought
weird
here, I don't
voodoo
want it to
there,
stay.
some bad mojo.
Are you a scaredy cat in that sense? I always find horror, you're one or the other. You're somebody who, like, if you went into a haunted house, you'd piss your pants and couldn't last 5 minutes. Or
Yeah,
you're somebody
I
who
am actually I
chases
am.
that stuff.
I do definitely chase it, but I don't like. I mean, there's this thing. I guess they have them all over the place, but people are sending me locally in Toronto. There's one of those overnight camping excursions where people dress up like zombies. It's like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
won't sleep all night. I got 3 kids. I don't sleep anyways. It's not an appealing come on for me. But the fact that some dudes or zombies are going to be terrorizing my ass all fucking night in the woods. I mean, I'm the one. I don't want to do that. There's used to, those haunted
That sounds
houses.
awful.
Yeah, they
That
had
sounds
one.
awful.
They had one in LA, and they actually advertised that they would wake you up in your sleeping bag, but
That's
you
what I'm
couldn't
talking
open
about,
your
yeah.
sleeping bag. And I was like, that sounds horrible,
Don't touch
guys.
me. Come on. And then even like in Canada we have the Nightmares Fear Factory. It's those haunted houses where you walk in, it's pitch black. You follow a little dot around while doors close and slam, and people grab your ass and stuff. I mean, when I was younger, I'd be like, yeah, let's do it. Now it's like, no, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, if you have
I
to
know I
sign a
will-
release
I'm
form,
almost
it's a bad
40. I
sign.
will have a
Yeah.
heart attack. I will die. So yeah, on that level, no. But I think now it's just I want not necessarily to be scared. I want to be reinvigorated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the fear is part of that experience. I mean, I know a lot of people, there's a bizarre backlash against James Wan's movies, Insidious, whatever, but I did see that by myself at the Toronto Film Festival. And there was a moment where, you know, in parts were silly, the ghost hunter bits, and they would drag me out of it, but then there are these moments, and that's what you live for when you're a horror fan, is those moments where I could feel like, I breathed in, I could feel like the chills just going up, and that I haven't had that in years. I was like, okay, well, no matter what happens from here on in this movie, I love this movie because it did that to me.
Yeah,
you know?
I think that's the hunt for us, especially as kids, because of how impressionable horror is. I remember when we had Savage Steve Holland, our best non-horror guest.
Yeah, he was amazing.
And that's what he was saying. He's like, he'd get up when he was a kid to watch, you know, these B movies, because there's always at least one cool
moment,
One cool moment.
a cool scare, a cool monster.
You have to be really
something.
you have to be really forgiving as a horror fan too, because let's face it, a lot of horror movies are not amazing. You know, they're I mean, everyone loves H.G. Lewis movies. Like, they're not good. You know, they're not well made, but there's those amazing moments, right? That you forgive all the trespasses that may
just to watch
bad lighting,
them.
boom, mic comes in, you know, whatever. You don't care.
But then they're going to
Because
crush a
there's
guy
moments.
with a rock, and it's all
and
worth
then,
it.
and then a banjo's going to play. I mean, it's like, wow, this is great. So you have to be to be a happy horror fan, you have to be very forgiving. And that's another thing that's a strange phenomenon these days. When I was a kid, there was a real sense of quest. And today, I think there's just so much, and it's so readily available that you don't have that. And I think a lot of people are crossing their arms, saying, okay, do it for me, do it. And they don't work with the movie, you know, and that they're grumpy. I think you're bound to be disappointed. Everyone wants to be disappointed, so they can go to the internet and say what a piece of shit that is. And, you know, it's just like, I think horror fans were happier when I was a kid.
Yeah.
We liked what we didn't get a lot, and when we got it, we were happy.
I think found footage is part of that. I think found footage is actually an easy thing to consume.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't take much work because it's a limited perspective anyway.
And you never
the way it's
revisit
shown.
it. You don't watch it again. It's a one-time go.
There's not a lot of ambiguity. It's not being constructed by a filmmaker using different various shots and techniques.
I
to
would
build
disagree
something.
with that on Marked Ones.
Yeah, Marked Ones was fun. That was probably
that
the
was the
best I'd seen in a
first
while. Yeah.
found footage film I've seen in a long time
was
where
creative.
I actually felt like they wanted it to have some type of spark and set design and style to it. It wasn't just, hey, we can shoot it in my house.
Right.
It's, you know,
Well, and
upper
the
middle
Rex
class
series is fun,
America
too.
I was
suburb.
gonna say
Yeah,
the
the
first-
Rex series are totally different
Yeah, the
different
Rex
things.
series,
Especially
yeah.
the,
I'd go
the
back and
third
forth.
one. I mean, I love the third one so much.
Yeah,
do
the
too.
second one scares the shit out of me, no matter
I
how
do
many
too.
times
No,
I
no,
watch
no.
it.
It's just crazy.
But talking
Crazier
about
they get, so better.
talking about an audience having to work a little, and obviously Under the Skin is one of those kind of films.
Yeah, you got to work. Cause and it's funny, I almost walked out of Under the Skin while I was watching it.
I have a feeling I'm going to
Yeah,
when
but
I
it's just
see
like
it.
you don't. But you don't because it just keeps turning weird corners, and then you
Right.
just keep going. And by the end, you're so glad that you stayed with it, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, anyone seen Under the Skin here? I'm just curious. Yeah, a couple
Yeah,
people.
you got to work, right? It's not an easy, and you can't be like texting while you're watching it. You have to immerse yourself in this alien world and follow this woman around, right?
Yeah,
It's
there's
amazing.
tone.
It's an
and-
experience, and I think that's what I'm looking for in genre movies now. Is like take me to another world, trap me there for 90 minutes, 2 hours, and make me come out a little bit different.
Yeah, with understanding, I was telling him it's just I was miserable watching it and not having a good time at all.
And the music,
and thinking
the music
I hate
is,
this, I hate
the music
this.
is daring you to stay with it too.
Yeah,
it's,
and that's
it's
the thing.
atonal and
Once it was over and I thought about it,
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's kind of horror.
Yeah.
You're showing me something that's just
And,
I
and
don't
the, wor- and
want
the
to
worst
face.
reaction is, fans are like, well, it didn't make any sense. I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't have to. When you have a nightmare, does it make sense? When you wake up, did it make sense that that's your mom, but it's not your mom? It's like, someone's got a head this big. It makes sense when you're in it. And then you come out of it and you're like, none of it made any sense, but that does not, there's a certain power there, right? And I love that. Remember Silent Hill the first time I saw it, people shitting on it because it was a video game adaptation. It's like, well, so what? I mean, we don't shit on comic book adaptations, but I felt like I was trapped in this crazy world for 2 hours, and it scared the hell out of me. Until the end when they tried to explain it all.
Yeah.
And then it fell
It's like, well,
apart.
don't explain it. I like the fog. I like the siren comes up. Some dude shows
Weird
up.
creatures.
Weird creatures. Totally lack of logic. And then at the end, they got to tie it all in there. And
Well, that's how the fog works. Speaking of fog, I mean, Carpenter's Fog, we just rewatched recently, the Scream Factory release, and it's like a nice, perfect little realized nightmare.
yeah, it is.
For all
yeah.
these
It's
characters are
perfectly.
sharing.
It's a perfect little movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't go too far in any
Yeah.
direction. It just stays the course. And it's back in the days when John would just let his music just be the gel. It's so good.
I wanted to touch upon, you were saying how horror was different for us as kids. I mean, for Fangoria, the Terror Teletype was the first thing I'd look at.
Yeah.
Now it's like that's
it's
the
old
news.
Yeah.
But I was telling Elric because he's never really been to a convention like this one, like a traditional convention. And I was trying to explain to him what the Fangoria Weekend of Horrors were like when I was 15 in New York. I mean, you'd get there early just to see the trailer reel. I mean, now you go on Apple or your phone or whatever, but
Yeah, it's already
that
there
was
now.
like you had to get there early to see trailers to maybe the next Nightmare on Elm Street or whatever.
Yeah.
But being in Canada, I mean, was there anything like the Fangoria Weekend of Horrors? What was the
No,
convention
we
experience
did
like
have a
for
weekend
you?
of horrors. We had one, Fango.
A
Came
Fango
up-
one.
Came up
Yeah.
and did one in Toronto, and then maybe one out west. I don't know, but no one came to it.
Huh.
My recollection is it was a really sparsely attended thing.
We
and-
only did it for 2 years.
Yeah.
But you went.
Oh yeah, did you? Yeah.
Oh
Did
no,
no,
I
you.
did
I'm
not.
asking
You
you.
did.
No, I didn't. I just remember the buzz around it. People I know that did go said it was pretty dead, and that's why it never took off. It never happened again. And then this is Toronto we're talking about. And Toronto is kind of like a weird town. It's cool, but it's very elitist, and horror doesn't seem to really fly in there. We got Rue Morgue there now. I wrote for those guys for 7 years, and I think that changed everything. I'm nothing against Rue Morgue at all, because if it wasn't for Rue Morgue and what I was doing there, I wouldn't be sitting here. But Rue Morgue's presence in the city and being a really kind of waving the Canadian flag, because that's the reason Rue Morgue stays alive, is that I don't know if anyone knows this. Does anyone read Rue Morgue? Yeah? Okay, so they are funded partially by the government. That's why you see like a lot of Canadian content in there and everything, because they have to get there. In Canada, you can, as long as you run 2 issues, you're entitled to the Canadian Periodical Fund, which pays for 50% of all your production costs.
Wow.
So, but they really rode that to the bank, and now, we talk about these these movies that are shot in Canada again. There's a bit of a renaissance in Toronto for horror. But back then, when I was a kid, it was a tumbleweeds rolling by, and you were just the lone man, God's lonely man.
So then what's the convention experience like for you? I mean, there were a few.
This
reward
one's
ones,
great.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I've been to a few. I feel like I'm trapped in the worst mall ever.
Yeah.
But I'm a little tired by day 3, no matter what. But
Yeah.
this one's freaking amazing. There's so many amazing people. Everyone's so friendly, and what's funny is that you're different. You're out there you're on the front lines, right?
I carry a machine gun and fired.
I'm in Toronto in
That's my
my
shtick.
mad lab, and my kids are running around me, and I got like 5 computers on the go, and I'm in my freaking silk robe. I mean, to me, none of it's actually even real. And then every month a box of magazines comes to my door, and I say, okay, I kind of made this or whatever, right? But it's not real. And then like this weekend, you get together, people like, hey, and then they remember things you wrote, or they ask you questions about this, and they sign and stuff, and it's like, oh my God, it is real. You're interacting with that environment, and it's really surreal for me. So I have a great time on that level. Yeah.
That is one of the nicest things with Fango, is that we interact with the fans all the time, but we never really interact with them, because it's always just email. And emails, like hundreds upon hundreds of emails a day. I'm not kidding.
Just words, just
And
little bugs on screen.
Yeah, so like 90% of my day is just responding to emails.
Yeah.
And then I come here and I actually realize that I do a job, because there's something being done and it's getting to people and it's resonating with people.
But you guys too. I mean, the first day we came here, you got your you're still a presence in LA. Everyone knows what you do, and you talk about your work. But you got fans coming up to you.
Yeah.
That was,
you got
yeah,
people
I mean,
from
One
other
of them is
parts of the
shooting this
country.
right now.
Yeah, one of
Dustin.
them's filming us.
They make you
Dustin.
posters and stuff. I mean,
Another one drove us to barbecue yesterday. John, right here. I mean, it's something that keeps you doing it, because
but that's
we're
it.
not being paid
Yeah,
when
I
we do
mean,
our show.
Yeah.
We're in a little room in Van Nuys, which is a really
Right.
shitty part of Los Angeles, and we do this once a week, just rambling, thinking no one listens. So it's
Yeah.
been amazing, the people that showed up here and that have come to the Fango table and taken
Yeah,
us to
it's really
barbecue or printed up posters and stuff. It's cool.
Yeah.
But it's really, I mean, genuinely important to hear what people like about what you do, so as you can keep doing or keep changing
Yeah,
or
because you second
stay
guess
interested.
yourself, right?
Yeah.
You totally second guess.
I mean,
yourself.
because otherwise we wouldn't do it just for the 3 of us. If it's
Yeah.
just a vacuum,
We would do this at the bar.
Yeah, I make
next to
fun of
Jump
Becca all the
Cut.
time. I don't need the show to do it.
He does, I
it's
must
easy.
say.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
successfully.
Not that successful. That's true.
So thanks to those people, and if you're not familiar with it, you should definitely check it out.
We have some postcards up here.
Well,
some on it.
before we part, guys, do we want to open it up to some fan questions?
totally,
Since
of
it's the
course.
first time we've ever done a live show, we thought we would end the day with fan questions.
It doesn't
anyone
have to be just for
has
us.
a
Yeah,
Chris,
for anything, for Chris, for otherwise. So, yeah.
And
Does
be
anybody
brave.
have anything?
Who's here for the ogre panel?
Yeah.
Oh, is that next?
Ogre panel. Can join.
okay.
Can
There
join
we
us
go.
next in here? Oh, okay. What the hell's the ogre panel?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a question.
Yeah, that was
love-
a
Kinda
real.
liked it.
Yeah, but it was weird. They didn't press screen that thing. It looked
They
like.
did. There were press
No,
screenings
okay,
for it.
so not in Toronto. We didn't get it. It was. Oh, they did press screen it in Toronto, but it was the night before it opened, so they didn't want any
Yeah.
reviews.
Yeah.
And
Well, Oh, we're going to have to. I'm sorry. I have to.
Oh,
that
yeah,
was
sorry,
my
'cause he's
board guy
recording it.
reminding
Yeah,
me I have to
yeah.
repeat the questions because no one
Yeah.
can hear you. The question was, what is a movie that has surprised us? And yeah, Dark Skies is a good
yeah,
one.
it was weird. I didn't anticipate that the cast didn't grab me, whatever, and then it just kept getting darker and darker, and then it ends like it ends, and it's just like, wow, this is a really. Yeah, it's
a fan is saying that he's
movie.
seen it. No, the way that and it was really bizarre. I'm not too sure why Blumhouse did this with it. They did a press screening in LA, but they selected maybe 5 people and invited them and called it the press screening. And I had gotten an invite, but I was doing something else that day, so I talked to the 4 people who did go. And they were all like, yeah, it's a pretty cool movie, but Blumhouse, they don't even know when they're going to release it yet. And that was like 6 months before the movie came out. And so by that time, we'd all forgotten about it. And then it just kind of, it happened. And then we discovered it on DVD. And I went on, I have a show where I talk about how phenomenal it is. But yet there's one of our fans, Dick Gronert, I'm sure you're listening, who thinks it's horrible. And he was like, why did you recommend this to me, Becca?
But a surprise has to be that kind of movie. It has to be one that some people won't like. Like Lords of Salem was so polarizing. And so I stayed away from that for probably almost a year.
I think that's his best movie.
And I found it really mesmerizing. But most people, especially friends I admired, all hated it. So I was like, okay, I can wait for that one.
Yeah.
I found it without any buzz, without knowing much about it. When I finally watched it, it was a different movie.
I find that movies there's these movies that are an intimate experience. It's be you and the movie. You have to watch it at a certain point where it's just the two of you. You're not distracted. You're out of that where it's not a buzz movie anymore, where that's over and you can just appreciate it for what it is as opposed to what people want it to be. Now, on that note, friends, I do have to go find Mr. Ogre because I have to find out where bring him to a panel to do with him, and I don't even know where it is. So I got to
think
do
it's the
some
other
work.
room.
Yes, it's the other room.
Giant room?
And I'm pretty sure all these people.
You're totally doing
Really,
the giant
Ogre?
room.
That's awesome.
Let's give Chris a big hand for joining us.
you.
Thank you,
Fangoria.
Chris.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks to you guys for sticking with us for the first live podcast.
Yes.
Alrighty, what's next again? You said
Conjoined.
There you go. So
Yeah.
that's obviously we're all here
If
for.
anyone's at all interested in what we do and what the show is, it's obviously a little different than this was. We've got postcards up here with links and everything. It's called Killer POV, and we record every week. Thanks
Free
for joining us.
stuff.
Please
Yes,
check us
every
out.
week, yeah.
Geek Nation.
Next episode is next Wednesday.
Is that when we're having Brett from...
No, we've got someone booked.
We're having Hannibal on, aren't we?
Oh, okay. Oh, maybe we don't. Well, we just recorded one with the Excision director, Ricky Bates Jr. That was a lot of fun.
Bill Lustig's a great episode
Yeah,
too.
McGarris. There's a lot of good stuff. I
Charlie
think we're
Band
up to
episode, I like.
58
episodes. So that's
Yes.
58 times probably 2 hours of your life that you should go back and revisit immediately. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.